Welcome back, everybody. I'm Tommy McCarthy, and this is Let's Talk Cyber. What a start to the new year we've got for you. We're going to do a series of predictions from industry experts and well-known personalities that are now operating in the cyberspace. I am delighted to have my fellow Englishman, the Right Honourable Stephen McPartland, tell us a little bit about what he saw last year in the cyberspace and what he thinks we can expect to see becoming front and centre this year in 2025. Stephen McPartland, welcome to Let's Talk Cyber, sir.
Hi, Tommy. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, as always. One fellow Scouser to another, both
Indeed.
being from Liverpool, so the exact same part of England. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. Stephen, for our listeners, because we do constantly get new people joining the Let's Talk Cyber podcast family, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, Stephen, what your previous life was, for want of a better word, and where you are right now.
Cool. Thank you, Tommy. So I have this rather posh title, the Right Honourable Stephen McPartland, given to me by the King, and that's a member of the Privy Council. So as you know, two lads from Liverpool, we're quite pleased about that. I think I spent 14 years as a member of Parliament. I was briefly National Security Minister. I served on the Joint Committee National Security Strategy, which oversaw the architecture of the intelligence services for 3 years. I did 4 years as chair of the Regulatory Reform Select Committee, and which was 1/3 of how regulations set in the United Kingdom. And I did a whole variety of other different bits and pieces there I won't bore your listeners about. But my last gig in Parliament was writing a report called the McPartland Review. They very kindly named it after me. And it was essentially a review into how cybersecurity can be an enabler of economic growth. So not just defensive, but something positive and exciting. And that's my ambition, as you know, to make cybersecurity focus more on innovation, jobs, opportunities, training, and economic growth.
Well, what a transition for you last year, Stephen. Coming out of a 14-year career on such a high, and I have to admit that was quite a high, to then all of a sudden recreate yourself in this cyberspace. You were busy. You seem to be everywhere.
Yeah, very much so. I'm very lucky because I was always a businessman as well. I never stopped my business interests. So I have 14, 15 years board level experience at different levels, businesses and some of my own. So the transition for me was something I thought long and hard about. And I really wanted to do cyber technology. I like the people. I like the industry. I think, you know, it's basically a massive opportunity when it comes to the future. It is literally, people talk about AI, which we'll talk about no doubt in a moment. But with AI, I always think that, you know, if you want to ensure that you're getting great information out of the models, you've got to protect the information that's going into the models, protect how the models actually think about that information, and then protect how the models spit that information out. So the more AI, the more cybersecurity you need. And you need to move away from just cybersecurity. It needs to be about cyber resilience and cyber recovery as well. So it's a hugely expanding topic, and it's an area that I was very interested in. I'm quite boring, as you know, so I have a Master of Science in computers and I can build computers. So I started off actually doing IT, and it's come full circle back. So I'm very excited about it. And as you say, I get asked to speak all over the world about cybersecurity.
Yeah, indeed, Stephen. Well, not many previous politicians can say that, you know, they're coming back to where they started from, you know, that politics was just a small stopgap, for want of a better word. Where better for you to be continuing your career in the space that you know so well. Tell me a little bit about what you saw last year, Stephen, on your travels in relation to what were you hearing about the industry? What were people talking about? What was the primary topics that you heard that kept on resonating through? This is for 2024, before we predict about some of the things we should consider for 25.
So it's quite interesting, actually. It didn't matter whether I was in, Israel or Dubai or Germany or any of the other countries, UK. Everybody had a problem around not having enough specialists, not having enough people to do the job. So it didn't matter what country you're in, what language they were speaking, but they were all saying with one voice, we don't have enough people. We need more cyber skills. And then once you dug into that, people from all different countries, literally every country you can imagine, where I was speaking to people from all over the world, they were all very, very concerned about not just not having enough people, but then actually the quality of the cyber skills. So whether or not they were going to be relevant. So taking people into roles and then those roles being in a position where they could actually continually progress, not just come in, do the job, because within a matter of months, their training might be irrelevant. So that pace of change, so you haven't got enough people, and then there's this pace of change underneath you at the same time. So there was a great deal of angst about that. That was a big, big one internationally. And I think another big one was a frustration that cyber was seen as something I came up with, talked about very much in the report, is cyber was seen as an IT problem rather than a board level problem. And one of the issues that I always raise is whenever you're talking to boards, I've sit on a number of them, is how can you actually afford the cash to survive a cyber incident? And when they say, well, how much does it cost? It's like, exactly. So how much will a cyber incident cost? So if we literally just shut down your ability to take money for 2 to 3 weeks, the chief finance officer literally looks as though he's going to die, or she's going to keel over. And it's like, oh, well, we can't do that. We go bust. And it's like, oh, but apparently it's an IT issue. And, it doesn't matter the size and scale of the company. And so that was a massive frustration as well that I saw in every single country, with every language being spoken at me.
So definitely human resource, the shortage of capable people, and you're absolutely right, Stephen. This industry is expanding and growing on such a rapid pace that the skilled people that we're looking for, that the industry requires, is something that needs to be considered. Upskilling is great for this industry, as you well know. So I'm sure there'll be the capability to access, enhancing skills. So I guess that's a roundup for 2024. What were the conversations you were having around what people expected would happen in 25? Was there any particular topics that were coming to the forefront for you? What were the conversations you were having? What were you hearing about what people thought might happen in 25?
So obviously AI is the subject that everybody loves to talk about. So with AI, they're all thinking about how to integrate AI. There's also a talk about whether some of AI is a bit of a fad, and people like me and you don't actually consider what we currently have to be artificial intelligence. It's more machine learning. But essentially, there is, a lot of people trying to integrate that type of activity into their companies, not really sure how or what they're going to do. A lot of fear about it. But as you just said, you can link AI to actually upskilling and transferring people into cyber skilled jobs. So instead of it being, oh, we don't need these people performing these functions anymore, it could be, well, actually, let's reskill those people so that they can provide these cyber functions instead. But AI was a big one. I think I always like to think of AI as something similar to the combustion engine. So the combustion engine, it replaced horses, I think, within about 10, 12 years across the world. And essentially, all the industries that looked into stabling, liveries, you name it, all those type of industries, they all went out to work quite quickly. But nobody at the time imagined that combustion engine would lead to rockets leaving this planet, putting satellites in space, which gives us the communications capability on how we currently run our global economies. So I think you shouldn't be frightened of AI. You should be thinking about, what are the potentials, what are the opportunities? And what we need to be better at is those people back then who we just sort of said, oh, well, we don't need you anymore. We need to think about, well, actually, let's reskill you. So, instead of just thousands of people losing their jobs, actually, let's think about how can we take those thousands of people and reskill them so that they can do a good job. So I think AI can actually be something really positive. But there was generally an angst and a bit of a fear around AI, and also a sense that some people felt they had to do something with AI so that their company remained competitive. They had no idea what, but they just felt they had to be saying AI.
Yeah, for sure. I like your analogy there, Stephen, of the evolution of the combustion engine and how it replaced, horse-drawn carriages. So it's one to consider, and it's certainly one that I will probably have up my sleeve and use. I will definitely hijack that analogy. Well, AI definitely seems to be front and center on most people's minds right now. Do you have any additional thoughts? Give me a prediction, Stephen. Come on. I want one prediction from the former politician about what he thinks will be the front runner in 2025, whether that's the implementation of quantum computing or the advancement of AI. Is there something that you've seen or witnessed personally that you believe is going to become a front runner that's going to be really hitting the world stage in the cyberspace?
I think there's going to be two things. So I think the first is going to be supply chains. So I talk all over the world about the importance of supply chains and economic resilience. And I think you're going to see a massive move towards governments saying, I think in this country, I know that the law is going to be coming out later this year that essentially says that critical national infrastructure has to cyber secure supply chains. That's going to be quite a big step forward because you've got to start identifying, well, what's my supply chain? I recommend in the report that we essentially widen that to anybody providing services to government. But essentially, supply chain cybersecurity is going to be something that comes out big and hard in this year because there's going to be a law pretty much underwriting it. So that's definitely something that's going to be happening. I think, and that's going to be massive for this industry because that's going to create huge opportunities. Because essentially, what you're going to be doing is essentially saying, well, the product, if you're critical national infrastructure, this product like electricity that we're supplying, we're now guaranteeing it's cyber secure from start to finish, not just our little bit at the end. And when you think about the UK economy, as you know, I always make the statistic that in the UK, over 99% of all businesses are actually SMEs. And everybody in our industry accepts that they have very little cyber security or cyber protection. So most of the large businesses that we interact with, they actually stand on the shoulders of often 4,000 or 5,000 SME suppliers in their supply chains. So I think supply chain cybersecurity is going to be explosively massive and huge this year. And I also think the second area that's going to be quite big is insurance and ransomware. So the government's I recommended in my report again that ransomware, we shouldn't really pay ransomware. We need to think about if we are paying it, it has to be reported so that there's some kind of central vehicle in understanding where the amounts are going to, who's paying it and why. And I won't go into details in here, but there was lots of reasons behind it and how it could be done. But the government has announced a couple of days ago a consultation on outlawing the wider public sector from paying ransomware. Now, to put this into context, currently, the only people who can't really pay ransomware payments in the UK are government departments. So technically, a police force could pay a ransomware request in the UK. That's not illegal. So it just kills me. But and this is money being transferred to criminals. I'm not saying any police force has done it, and they definitely wouldn't admit it. But the reality is that that is actually allowed currently. So they're doing a consultation to widen it out. And the reason why it's important, I mean, I think it should be everywhere, but the reason why it's important is the public sector in the UK accounts for about 45% of GDP. So can you imagine the impact on the economy if 45% of the British GDP says, right, we're not paying ransomware anymore? That's another massive opportunity for cyber business and cyber industry this year.
It's two amazing points, Stephen, and to date, nobody has highlighted both supply chain and ransomware and insurance. So it's a contribution very valued to our listeners. And interestingly, you talked about the public sector. We see the amount of damage that's being done on the smaller public sector, public authorities, parish councils, the smaller councils that don't have that resource to protect themselves effectively enough. So I do believe that the business community need to come together and figure out how they can support the public sector. Valuable insights there, Stephen. Really much appreciated. And I would say to our listeners, watch this space. Let's see whether or not this prediction comes through. If it does come true, any one of them come true, we will create a leaderboard, and you could well be the predictions champion of 2025, the Right Honourable Stephen McPartland. As ever, Stephen, it's a pleasure having you on Let's Talk Cyber. We do look forward to speaking to you throughout the course of the year.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Look forward to seeing you in Washington at your wonderful conference as well.